Hi, this is Steve Hardy from the OpenStack Heat team. I'm just going to give a very simple example of how to use the software deployment and software config functionality of Heat. So in this example I've got an environment file, and in this case I'm not using any resource registry functionality. I'm just specifying a number of parameters to save me typing them all on the command line. The only thing of note is that I'm using a specially prepared Syros image which contains a little script which knows how to pull down the software configuration data from the Heat API and apply it and then signal back once it's done. Any image which is going to be used for software config purposes is going to need those tools either applied at runtime or more likely built ahead of time. There are instructions on how to do that in both the Syros case and also to how to prepare, for example, a Fedora image in the Heat templates repo. So I've got this little example script. This is the config we're going to apply. It's incredibly simple. The thing to note is that we've got this variable being passed in, and we're going to see if we then look at the Heat template, which is the software configured server, that we have a number of resources, and one of the inputs is message. And so in this case the group, which is the type of config you're going to apply, that could be one of a number of things depending on the hook script that you have inside the image. We've got example hook scripts that work for Puppet and Chef and other config management tools that you may be interested in. In this case we're just going to apply a simple shell script, and this message can be given a default value. That message is just a variable name, you can call that whatever you want, and then we're going to use this getFile function, which is basically going to pull in the example script, and you might use that getFile function to for example pull in Puppet manifest or Chef recipe or something like that. So the software config encapsulates the config that you want to apply, and then the software deployment is the thing which actually handles applying the config. So this references the config resource on this line, and it also references a server, which is the place where you actually want to apply that config. Optionally you can specify a signal transport. There are a couple of different methods of signaling Heat on completion. In this case I've chosen to use the native Heat signal method because that's how the Syros script, which I mentioned a minute ago, works. And then you can specify input values. So in this case I'm going to override the default of no message with a hello Paris. Then if you look at the server resource, you don't need to do anything special other than having the user data format set to software config, and that basically makes the OS Nova server resource prepared and ready for interacting with the software deployment resources. Optionally, again, you can specify the type of software config transport you want to use. This is basically how the credentials are provided such that the script inside the instance can poll the Heat API, because the data for the software configuration is made available to the server resource after the server itself has actually been built. So in this case I'm going to use the poll server Heat method. At the bottom you can see there's just the IP address, which allows me to know what the IP address of the server is once it's been built. So let's launch the stack. So I've specified stack name, template name, and the environment name. Let's give that a different name. So here we can see that we've created the server, we've created the config, and then we've finished applying the software deployment, which goes to create complete at the point where you get the signal back from the server. So because I was using that small Syros image, that's all happened very, very quickly, and there was not much config to apply. So now we can see whether that's worked. We do Heat and we can see the IP address in this case. If we do and there we can see that the config has been applied. So hopefully that gives you a very simple introduction to how the software config resources work in Heat. There are some much more advanced examples if you look in the Heat templates repository, which can give you ideas of how to do things like applying configs for Puppet and other tools. So hopefully once you've got started with this, you can have a look in there and see how those work.